Hey everybody, Vegan Mark here. I want to talk about my studies of liberalism in Law 101, which is the next unit that I'm studying in the law course at University of New England. This is a subject that I grappled with for the last week or so, and I'm actually starting to enjoy the reading. Strangely, it's become quite interesting, and I have this book here which I just got, and I found that actually getting the book and reading the text from the book rather than reading on a computer screen has helped me immensely to understand the topic in ways which I couldn't do just by reading the screen. So I'm really happy that I'm starting to get a grasp of the concept in this topic. So what is liberalism? Let's talk about the subject. There's a few issues here in the introduction of Law's Philosophical Foundations, which states that there's a great difference between law in action and law in books, and the object of practicing law is to try and bridge or to try and understand and comprehend that gap between law in books and law in action. So, for example, individual interests relating to property and personal autonomy, though highly prized in legal doctrine, are balanced or traded against competing moral values and the public interest. So the clash of political and moral ideals around liberalism is the topic explored largely in this book. So the object of the book is to contrast the ideal of the law with its actuality and appreciate that there are various contexts in which law operates rather than just one particular simple context. The exercise we are embarking on is one at a high level of generality and is designed to throw light upon the nature of law rather than to offer a universal theory for law. So liberalism is the start of a study in law, but it is not the end, because it's a simplified version of what actually goes on. So it comes to the topic of what is liberalism, and it talks about why it's so complicated and so on. The contours of liberalism can be viewed more clearly when contrasted with competing ideologies like absolutism, which is the belief in unlimited government, and socialism, which is the belief in collective ownership of productive assets. So if we understand liberalism in terms of, for example, possessing property, we see that it's not socialism. It's completely outside the realms of socialism. One of the questions we ask as liberals is how it can be used to preserve the liberty of individuals from the encroachments of others. So liberals tend to unite on the need for law to preserve the liberty of the individual from the encroachments of others. But the question that emerges from that is the law to be used only to provide a neutral framework within which individuals can peacefully pursue their separate ends? Or is the law to be used as a tool of social engineering to create collective freedoms? So that's a very interesting question. Is the law passive or is it active to create a socially engineered situation? So another question is how ironic it is that sometimes liberal attitudes and even illiberal laws, like anti-discrimination laws in avowedly liberal societies, can actually fail to correct gender and racial inequality. So it'll be discussed in later chapters why that is so. The elements of liberalism include liberty, negative liberty, and the protection of morals and so on. And I'll just discuss a couple of these now. The first one is liberty. In the element of liberty, people owe no obligations unless they have freely entered into agreements with each other. So in law books it says that if you don't enter into agreement, you have no obligations to society. But as a mental health authority client for the last 10 to 15 years, I realized that is not true. All people do have obligations to society in what's known as the social contract, and that will be discussed later. Negative liberty is the next element of liberalism. Negative liberty is freedom from certain things. The state is not seen to be under an obligation to give positive assistance to individuals, but is obliged to refrain from interfering in an individual's own attempts to do so, and it should help protect the individual from the interference of others. Historically, however, liberal societies have moved from the mere protection of negative liberties to the promotion of positive ones. So that's a little bit hard to explain, but basically liberal societies do not just protect our individual existence, but they also promote those needs which we might have, such as the need for health care or the need for adequate housing, for example. I think the need to vote or to participate in society is part of our positive liberties. And so it goes on. There's something called the harm principle, which is an important principle in understanding liberalism and how it operates. The harm principle is basically the idea that an individual should not be interfered with unless he or she causes harm to others. The only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others. As we will see with mental health authority, however, in my personal experience, we will see that in reality this is not true, and an individual who is causing harm to himself, such as threatening suicide, can actually be interfered with and prevented from causing harm to himself. So liberalism goes out the window in those instances. What does liberalism have to say about the protection of morals? It says here, individuals should be at liberty to pursue their own conception of what is good for them, provided it does not cause harm to others or unreasonably interfere with the liberty of others. So, in the law books, it says that liberalism is designed to allow individuals to pursue their own concept of what liberty is. However, in reality, I'll tell you again, there are strict controls on our liberties to pursue our individual needs. So if we're forced to take drugs under the Mental Health Authority, for example, it severely constrains and constricts our ability to become individuals and to realize our potential as individuals. Interesting thing about religion in liberalism is that in Australia the absence of an established religion is enshrined in the Australian Constitution. That means there is no prescribed religion, and the federal government cannot impose any religious observance or prohibit the free exercise of any religion. So religion is a free slate. It's given a free rein, but is not prescribed by the Australian Constitution. So it also, one of the theses for liberalism is that morals do change as society changes and develops. So in 2020, which is when I'm making this video, the practical difficulties of removing laws is dealt with once moral attitudes have changed. So if, for example, homosexuality is regarded as immoral in 1970s, today it is not regarded as immoral, and society moves on and develops. And for that reason, liberalism deals with the practical difficulties of the inconsistencies that have to be dealt with when imposing or substituting new laws. It reminds me of the play by Shakespeare called Measure for Measure, where, you know, the state has become slack and old laws have become redundant and new laws have become slack and so on. And the whole play is about how to impose or implement new laws when the old ones have become redundant. The fourth concept or element of illiberalism I want to talk about is individualism. Individualism is so deeply rooted in our thought that it is hard to understand. There is difficulty in imagining it because it's hard to contrast it with a different principle, something that is collective in our imaginations. However, liberal legal models are not immutable, and some scholars have pointed to the changing relationship between contract, tort and criminal law as proof that Western common law countries are actually becoming post-liberal, or at least embracing liberalism in a radically new kind. So there's a lot more to talk about in liberalism. There's a few more concepts here which I could talk about. But I've talked at length about some of the basic concepts of liberalism, and I hope this offers you a basic introduction to the subject. And I have obviously learnt a lot by teaching you in this video. So this is the book again. It's called Law and Context by Bottomley and Bronnett, 4th edition. And I'm looking forward to reading the rest of it. It's over 350 pages, actually over almost 450 pages. So it's a long book, and I hope to get through this during the course of the next trimester. So thanks for watching, and bye for now.